Science is the way we understand the natural world. But when people think about science, they often ask, what's the practical application here? And that's a fair question, but let's put the answer to that in some kind of broader context. Science is a spectrum. On one end, there's basic science, in which the goal is to create new ways of understanding how the world works. On the other end, there's applied science, which takes this new understanding and develops it for practical application. And both ends of the spectrum are important. New basic science opens the doors to new applications, and new applications or new technologies enable new experiments in basic science that can then give rise to the next generation of applications. Of course, as in all exploration, we don't always know when or how basic science will lead to new applications. But what we do know is that many of the most important applications have been enabled by basic science. Now, that may be hard to fathom, but here's an example of how it works. In my lab, we study how molecules of a gas absorb microwaves. This is very basic research, but we do this because when molecules absorb microwave energy, they spin in very specific ways. And it turns out that by analyzing this spinning, we get a glimpse into the world of molecules that's too small to see, but at the same time dictates everything around us. By studying this spinning, our experiments can determine, for example, how atoms are arranged in a molecule. We can even measure the distances between them, which are typically only about a few billionths of an inch.
Now, just to be clear, what we observe in these gas phase experiments is quite different from what goes on in your microwave oven. This is the apparatus that we use for these experiments. And what you see here is a large vacuum chamber. Molecules enter from the top, and then we zap them with microwaves from the side. And as they spin, they emit very specific microwave frequencies that we can detect and process with the electronics that you see here. This produces the kind of pattern you can see on this oscilloscope. Each little spike here corresponds to molecules spinning in a different way, which is our window into where atoms are in a molecule and what they're doing. And then we analyze these spikes using quantum mechanics, which is the basic physics that governs atoms and molecules. And we get a clearer picture of what molecules look like and how they behave.
Now, what can you do with this? This type of experiment is applied around the world in lots of different fields, from astronomy to pharmaceuticals. But in our lab, we've long been interested in understanding how and why molecules stick together or aggregate. And that basic science has gotten us into studying processes that could operate in our environment, particularly our atmosphere. So, a very important process in the atmosphere is the formation of so-called aerosol particles. These are tiny particles that are too small to see, but they're super important in our environment. That's because even though they're small, they can reflect or absorb sunlight, so they control how much solar energy reaches the planet. They can also initiate the formation of cloud droplets, and they can provide surfaces for chemical reactions to take place in the atmosphere. And near the Earth's surface, they can even pose problems for human health. So the question is, how do these particles form? This is a major issue in climate modeling, and you can see that our long-standing interest in understanding how molecules aggregate is perfectly connected to this question, right? If you're going to form particles out of thin air, you need to start by aggregating 2, and then 3, and then 4 molecules, etc., until this little cluster grows into a particle. And the properties of these tiny molecular clusters exert huge leverage over the ultimate rates at which larger particles form, and so studying them can help us understand the kinds of processes that lead to atmospheric aerosol, which again is an important problem in environmental science. Now, here's the point. Our ability to do this work relies on fast electronics and sensitive microwave detectors. And these are technologies that have been made possible by basic research in solid-state physics. So this is really an example of the synergy between basic and applied science that I was talking about before. And it illustrates the interconnectedness of science. Look what we have here. Fundamental solid-state physics has given us new technologies that let us study spinning molecules in a vacuum in order to better understand the types of processes that influence our climate. These kinds of synergies repeat over and over again in science. You might ask if you, as a student, can ever be involved in science? And the answer is, of course, learn the basics, chemistry, physics, biology, etc., but also math. Math is so important to what we do. And always keep in mind, and this is important, that science is not about memorizing a series of disconnected facts. It's a way of thinking and a way of understanding. Remember, it's the human attempt to make sense of the world around us. And because it's a human activity, it's designed for human minds. And so you should expect it to be absolutely accessible to you.